so is Kylian Baptiste. But here comes the Olympic.
She is the greatest female sprinter in the world.
It's not a girl thing, it's a skills thing.
Welcome to Woman in Sport, a podcast dedicated to bringing you exciting stories and guests. I'm Tess Mostolis.
And I'm Sophie Timmerman.
That innings was the best innings of the year by a man or a woman in any format of the game.
Have you ever heard of Eileen Ash, Rachel Hayhoe-Flint or Betty Wilson? Well, after this episode, you will. Today we talk about cricket, a game that is very popular in the UK, India, Pakistan, Australia or South Africa. We talk to Richard Thomas, an associate professor at Swansea University and cricket lover who has just wrote a book about it. Together we take a look at some of the movers and shakers of women's cricket, the hoops they had to go through to play the game they love, and recent changes that put women at the top of cricketing institutions and teams. Now, before we delve into your book, do you have a favorite cricket match, male or female, that you could share with us?
I talk about it in the book. There was an innings, actually, an Indian player called Harmanpreet Kaur was in the Women's World Cup in 2017. They were playing Australia, actually. So, I mean, she performed this amazing feat of 171 not out against the best bowling in the world. But it was cool. I mean, I remember watching that game live with my mouth open thinking, what on earth is this woman doing? It was absolutely incredible. I mean, some of the things that I've mentioned in the book actually were Shield Berry, who's a very respected journalist about cricket. He called it perhaps the finest innings by a woman outside Test matches and one that will attract fans towards women cricket. Somebody else said it redefined the possibilities for women cricket. Charlotte Edwards, who was former captain of England, said it was the best innings she'd ever seen. Wisden, Cricket Monthly, who's a magazine I've written for in the past, said that pound for pound, that innings was the best innings of the year by a man or a woman in any format of the game. And I was fortunate to be watching that live on the television. And it was spellbinding. It was carnage, really. I mean, the way she was hitting that ball and how far she was hitting it was astonishing. And she had this fierce kind of determined look on her face. It was quite odd because she didn't seem to be enjoying it. She seemed to be so kind of caught in the moment and fixed with what she was doing. She didn't obviously seem to be getting a lot of pleasure out of it, but it was the most astonishing performance.
You have written a whole book on cricket. Why are you so drawn to this sport?
Well, good question. I mean, lots of sports. You're obviously both sports fans. I mean, maybe your love of sport is maybe something that was handed down to you from family members. In my case, cricket was definitely handed down to me by my dad. So my dad started taking me to see cricket when I was about 3 or 4 years old. The first game he ever took me to, I mean, I was far too young at 4. Nobody is ever going to understand a game of cricket at age 4. And he said in order to get me to stay there, you know, he had to buy me ice cream every 20 minutes all the way through the day. So goodness knows what I was like when he took me home to my mother. But my dad was a good cricketer, actually. He played for Wales secondary schools in 1951. And yesterday, actually, I've been looking for this item for a long time on the internet and actually found the programme of the game where he played for Wales secondary schools against England secondary schools in August 1951. I found the programme and it was delivered to me yesterday. And shortly after he played in that match, he became a student at Swansea. So 70 years ago this year, he became a student and he actually went on to be the captain of the men's university cricket team. By the time I was born, cricket was very much in the blood. And I think the really important thing that he did for me, as well as sort of introducing me to the game, he also introduced me to the people who wrote about the game. He gave me a book when I was about 10, I suppose. And it was a book that he got on his 21st birthday. And it was it was very plain cover, very unexciting to look at, and a very unexciting title. It was called The Book of Cricket. I mean, you'd struggle to find a less imaginative title for a book about anything, wouldn't you? But this book was beautifully written, the kind of purple prose, the lovely kind of sophisticated, deft descriptions of players, the beautiful kind of black and white photos 100 years old or so of old players. So that kind of connected me then to the literature that had been written about the game. So, I started to write my own. So I've, over a period of quite a long time, I've written lots of articles for lots of different magazines and websites and things. And my dad had always nagged me and said, look, why didn't you put all of this into a book? And I never took it particularly seriously. It seemed like an awful lot of work to me. And then one day out of the blue, somebody contacted me and said, look, we've read some of your stuff. We think that there's a book there. And of course, when somebody in the profession says that there's a book, your parents are sort of, they're duty bound to love you and say you're brilliant, aren't they? But when somebody else does, then that was the catalyst, really. So I started writing the book. And then my dad became very ill. So my dad had cancer. So I wanted to try and finish the book. I mean, my aim was to try and get it published before he died, which I didn't manage to do. But I did manage to finish it in first draft form. I got to present it to him as a big sort of massive Word document in a big folder in the last few weeks of his life. And I know he got a lot of joy from reading that. I thought he was just going to read it and say, oh, it's really good. I really enjoyed it, which he did. But he also gave me a huge long list of spelling mistakes and typos and things that we would sort of, the scrutiny that as academics we would apply to a student's work, he applied to my book. I was very glad that I was able to get him that before he died. That at least he got to see that it was going to be a book and it was going to get published and all of that. So that's the story behind the book. That's the inspiration behind the book. And that's who kind of introduced me to the game, really.
I think you mentioned a very interesting point. Thanks for sharing this with us. And it's also something you mentioned in your book, the role of the parents and these strong female parts. How do you think the parents and mothers took part in the development of women's cricket particularly?
There's a few examples of some very strong women. I mean, on the cover of the book is a very famous Victorian cricketer called W.G. Grace, who's someone who kind of embodied the whole game. I mean, he would be recognisable to people who know nothing about cricket. He was a very famous Victorian character. And he had a very famous mother. Her name was Martha. And Martha Grace was, her father was something of a local inventor. Sounds a bit eccentric, to be honest. And on one occasion, he put Martha in a chair and he tied a series of kites to this chair and he actually elevated her into the sky to a height of 300 feet. So Martha clearly had something about her. She certainly had a lot more courage than I would have had, being elevated to that height. But, so yeah, lots of cricketers have kind of paid tribute to their mothers. I have. But as I say, it's nice now that their roles are no longer these kind of support roles. They are, playing active part of the kind of infrastructure.
This chapter in your book is a structure around several very influential female cricketers who have left their mark on the game. How did you go about choosing which ones to include? I
think most of them were sort of self-selecting. In terms of players, there are a number of very influential women. Molly Hyde would be one. Enid Bakewell would be another one. More recently, Charlotte Edwards, who's England cricket captain. Heather Knight. There's an Australian player called Elise Perry, who is probably the big superstar in women's cricket at the moment. The one I think that I was very keen to choose to write about was Rachel Heyhoe Flint, that you might have noticed. So Rachel Heyhoe Flint was a bit of a force of nature. I think I bring that across in the book. She charmed people into kind of helping her cause, which was to basically further, women's cricket. We have, Lords in London is the kind of home of cricket, of world cricket, really. And attached to Lords is this organisation called the MCC, the Marylebone Cricket Club. For the first time in its 233-year history, in October of this year, we will have our first woman president. But for a long time, women were not allowed to be members of the club. And Rachel Heyhoe Flint, in not a threatening way, but in a kind of let's try and change things way. She tried to change things by reasoning that they were, the fair and equitable thing to do. She tried to become a member, and the first time she tried, she was kind of voted down. But in 1999, she kind of pushed, and finally women were admitted. Now, because of the waiting list, it's 20 years, we haven't really seen any difference yet, have we? Because those women who would have joined the end of the queue, they probably still aren't even members yet. So I would expect, let's hope anyway, that over a period of time, more and more women are going to become members of the club. It's happening, but I think that was largely down to her. Not only was she sort of one of England's most famous and successful cricketers, she was also played this huge part in kind of suffrage, if you like, off the field, in terms of getting women up there and getting women's cricket to be taken seriously. Just to give you an idea how far we've come, when she played, I think for the first time in Lords, which is in 1976, there was a huge row about the women using the men's changing rooms, and that the women were going to be walking through this big long room, the long room which traditionally women weren't allowed in. So, we have come a long way since then, but I suppose in some ways it's a shame that those rules ever kind of existed. But it's not only cricket they existed in. If you look at, it's the Masters now, isn't it, in Georgia, in Atlanta. Golf is one of those sports where, they've had those sort of arcane gendered rules about admission and, people being allowed in certain parts of buildings and, not being allowed to do this when the men are allowed to do that. So it's not the only sport that's been afflicted by that. But I'm very pleased to say that the MCC is changing and it's becoming more enlightened and liberated and all of that. But so she was an obvious one to pick. Ellyse Perry, as I say, bringing it up to date was another one that I picked, mainly because the fact that she is someone else who's sort of transcending the game a bit now. Yeah, as far back as 2013, British sports magazines were calling Ellyse Perry the most marketable sports person in Australia and the 36th most marketable sports person worldwide. That's 7 years. That was at the beginning of her career. She's done astonishing things since. She would have gone up, she's a big deal. She's also part of the most successful women's cricket team in history, the Australian women's cricket team. They've just this week won their 23rd consecutive game, which is the longest kind of string of victories. So they're by far and away the best team in the world. And she's probably the best player in the best team. So she's also a dual international for Australia. She played for Australia football in a World Cup, a Women's World Cup. So she's kind of multi-skilled and a great ambassador for the game. So I wanted to kind of give her as an exemplar of how women's superstars are emerging now, in the same way that the men are.
Yeah, I really like the way you describe these figures in your chapter and how you also gave some anecdotes of Betty Wilson, who postponed her wedding because she put cricket first. I thought that was brilliant. So, I think these are really remarkable personalities. Do you think you need these kind of, outstanding personas to move forward the sport the way that they did?
Yeah, you do. I think another example would be Enid Bakewell, who you might remember. So Enid Bakewell was another one of those sort of almost self-selecting women, in the game. But when she was first picked to go to Australia and New Zealand to represent England, and this was in the late 60s, she had to pay for her own airfare, right? So, she was holding coffee mornings. She actually, I think she had access, whether she lived on a farm or something, but she had access to a ready supply of potatoes. So she was actually selling potatoes at the side of the road in order to raise money to pay for her airfare to play cricket for England. You've got to be dedicated. You've got to want it badly to do that, haven't you? No one had ever given these careers to them on a plate. They had to fight for them. They had to fund themselves. They had to often, juggle other jobs, raising a family, playing cricket, training, staying fit, all of that. And the fact that they were able to do that in a way, as I was talking earlier, where, even recreationally, men sort of take it for granted. They're just allowed to do that sort of stuff. They don't, without a backwards glance, they were left with all of that stuff, plus their own careers. So I think that's what really, that really heightened my admiration for the women that I talk about in that chapter. And I think I conclude the chapter by saying, look, women's cricket has got this sort of purity and it's got these high values about it, because nobody, certainly up until recently, nobody would have played women's cricket because they were going to become wealthy out of it. If they wanted a serious cricket career, that was a huge amount of sacrifice, a huge amount of probably raising their own money and missing out on other things in order just to be able to say that they played for their country. And I think, to me, that's what sport, that epitomizes, that sort of amateur approach to sport, where you're juggling things, you're really putting effort in, you may be struggling to kind of make ends meet, but you're really dedicated and married to your sport, aren't you, when you're prepared to do that. I think they all have that in common, whether they were prepared to battle to get what they wanted and battle to be successful in a way that I don't think many men would have had to have. You may have remembered reading about another amazing woman cricketer called Eileen Ash. I don't know if you recall her.
Yeah, we're just going to ask you about this sensation of a woman who is still going strong at 109. So please tell us more about her. She's
in her 110th year, Eileen Ash, and they made her repass her driving test when she was 105, which she did. But she played for England. She was born before the Titanic sunk, right? She played for England in a test match in 1937. And of course, her career, like so many, would have been interrupted by the war years. So during the Second World War, she worked for MI6. And as I think I quote in the book, she's very diplomatic about what she actually did, in as much as she's not telling you what she actually did. So there is a general feeling that she was maybe involved in some form of espionage. That's speculation, but I think, if you're in MI6 and you won't tell anyone what you're doing, it's probably a good bet that you're doing something like that. So then she's outlived any other international cricketer. She's the longest lived international cricketer of all time. I think from memory, she's only the second international cricketer, men or women, to reach the age of 100. There was a South African man called Norman Gordon who died when he was 103. But she's still going at 110, or almost 110. She's sort of got this incredible kind of fitness routine. She's got these sort of apple a day kind of approach to life, keeps the doctor away, all of that. But she's lived an amazing life. And back in 2017, England's women got to the final of the World Cup at Lord's, where they played India. And there's a tradition at Lord's where there's a big bell outside of the pavilion. And, normally someone very well known or very well connected with the game is given the honour of ringing this bell. It's the 5-minute bell. It tells everybody that play is going to start in 5 minutes. And she was given the honour of ringing that on the morning of the World Cup final. And later on, she was spotted in the pavilion. So at the age of 105, flirting with a former prime minister, drinking champagne. And an amazing woman. And again, who would have been through all of those sacrifices, playing it for the love of the game, putting other things in her life aside in order just to fulfill her love of cricket. So I could not write a book about women's cricket without mentioning her, because she's just amazing, isn't she? I mean, I would almost, out of all of the people that I've written about in the book, I think if you said, if you could meet any of them and talk to any of them, she would definitely be in the top 3 without any question.
When I read 109, the first thing I did was to go on Google and check if she's still alive. It was really good to see that she was. She sounded like an amazing person to talk to. I agree. I would love to just grab a coffee or a tea or something with her.
Well, there's a good, if you look on YouTube, there's a good video of her. Only a few years old, maybe 3 or 4 years old, talking to England's current women's cricket captain, Heather Knight, and they're doing yoga together. So the film just starts off with these two legs up in the air, and you're thinking that's got to be Heather Knight, but it's not. It's Eileen's legs are up in the air, aged 105. So yeah, an amazing, remarkable woman.
We were talking before about how these women through time had to face many more sacrifices to just fund their career in cricket. Obviously, that is changing a little bit now, but I wonder if there's anything that women's cricket has that men cricket doesn't.
My dad, who was a big women's cricket fan, he always said the same. We always agreed that technically we always felt women were better cricketers than men. It's like they'd been, we have this thing called a coaching manual, which is the thing that kind of shows you how to play the game in its most pure form, if you like. The way that the coaches would tell you all sorts of details about positions of your elbows and positions of your shoulder and being side on when you bowl, and so on. And we both felt that women's cricket was technically very, very good. Like women had been coached very well. They understood the technique very well. Of course, things tend to happen a bit slower in women's cricket, in the same way that, the 100-meter women's record is a little bit behind the men's. Clearly, there's all sorts of biological reasons for that. I mean, in terms of cricket, I mean, one of the metrics that people tend to look at is the speed of the bowling. So in men's cricket, I mean, I think we've breached the 100 miles an hour barrier a couple of times. I mean, the very fastest bowlers that would be around at the moment would be bowling on a good day, perhaps 150 kilometers an hour. Women's cricket, I mean, the really fast bowlers would be in the early 120s. So you can see there's quite a difference in the speed, but I don't only just put that down to kind of physique and so on. I think one of the things to kind of flip your question around a bit is what do women's cricket have that men don't? I think it's more a case of what does men cricket have that women are not given the opportunity to, which is to play the long form game. Now, there's lots of different formats of cricket. The kind of longest one, which is a test match, lasts for 5 days. So in a 5-day game, you're getting an opportunity to learn your trade as a cricketer. So, you've got time to do things. There are long periods of time, perhaps, where there's a relative amount of inactivity. Not much is happening. There are these kind of lulls in play. And during that, you're able to look at the opposition, work out how to get them out, maybe look at elements of their technique that you could copy, that you could mimic. And it just makes you generally a better player by being immersed in the game. Now, women don't play 5-day cricket, or very rarely do they play 5-day cricket. The cricket that women play almost all across the world is all over in 1 day. So it's crash bang wallop. Without that ability to be able to kind of let these skills germinate and develop over a long period of time. I mean, just to give you an idea, the man and the woman who are captaining England at the moment are exactly the same age. They're actually born 4 days apart, right? There's Heather Knight, who's the women's captain, and a chap called Joe Root, who is the men's captain. They're both just about 30 years old, okay? They started playing England roughly the same time. Heather Knight started playing a little bit before Joe Root. So Joe Root has played for England 103 times. 103 of those 5-day games, right? Heather Knight, who's been playing for England longer than him, has played 7. These long form games, which is the game in its purest sense, where you are able to kind of develop your skills, become a cricketer, learn how to play. Women don't get the opportunity to play those games. And I think that's one of the reasons why perhaps the fielding isn't quite as sharp as it would be in the men's game. Perhaps the bowling isn't quite as fast as it would be in the men's game. I mean, all of that is contributing to that kind of inequality. So I think one of the good things that's happened recently, and I mention my dad again, because my dad had a favourite cricketer called Sarah Taylor, who is a wicketkeeper, if you like, in baseball terms, would be the kind of catcher, the one that stands behind the batsman, And she was called or described as, by another kind of international wicketkeeper of long ago, as the best wicketkeeper in the world, man or woman. I mean, the fact that she was being seen as a cricketer first and as a woman second, I mean, that was pretty encouraging. And the same cricketer, Sarah Taylor, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, has been appointed as the wicket-keeping coach for Sussex men's wicket-keepers. So now we have a woman coach in men's cricket. I mean, that's That was unthinkable. I mean, not that long ago.
I think that's phenomenal. And I think it also ties back to just the success of the female English team. I mean, they've done incredibly well. I think that's also something you mentioned before. They've done maybe a bit better than their male counterpart even. Why do you think that is? What's the support base in England that makes it so strong?
Well, I mean, when you say they've done a bit better, I would say they've done a lot better, actually. I mean, England's men won their first World Cup in 2019. Really kind of exciting day, made headlines all over the world. What was given much less publicity on that day was that England's women had already won the World Cup 4 times before that happened. So everybody would know that England's men had won it once. How many people would know that England's women already won it 4 times? And I think they won it 4 times, not necessarily because the infrastructure of the game allowed them to do that. I think it was more of the sheer force of the characters that were involved. People like Rachel Heyhoe-Flint and people that have come since, Charlotte Edwards, and so on. They were the reasons, really, I think, that these determined women who were prepared to sacrifice, prepared to go that extra mile. You know, it's the characters involved that took them to these successes. I think now, as women's cricket's becoming a bit more professional, I mean, obviously, you know, there's training, there's coaching, there's more money in the game. There's kind of the squad system, there's the development programs and so on. Obviously, that infrastructure is building at last. But I don't think it was there when England were winning World Cups. England's women were winning World Cups. It was all because they had some really good players who were determined to win, you know? I think things are changing. I think Claire Connor becoming the president in October. I mean, that's a massive deal. I think we have a new tournament that's about to start. It was delayed from last year because of COVID. It's called the 100. I mean, basically it's cricket, but they've tinkered around with the rules. So I would say I don't like the idea of tinkering with the rules. What I do like the idea of is that this is a kind of franchise tournament that's going to be run in various regions around the UK, bringing the best players in the world, men and women. They will be playing on the same day. So if you go buy a ticket to go and watch a match in the 100, your home team, the women will play first, and then straight after the men will play. So you get to watch 2 matches. But I think the really encouraging thing, 2 things about the 100, even though I don't like the idea of it, is the first is women's cricket is going to be shown on terrestrial television. It's going to be on the BBC. I mean, up to this point, women's cricket has been on satellite TV, so you need a subscription to watch it. So it's going to maybe be exposed to a much wider audience. And the other thing, which I think is very encouraging, is the prize pot is going to be split 50-50. So men and women are going to be earning the same money for playing in this competition, which I think is great, you know. I mean, you know, we're getting there, aren't we? Where cricket is becoming, we're trying to right these wrongs slowly but surely. So I think those are 2 really encouraging things, as well as the Claire Connor thing and the fact that Sarah Taylor is going to be coaching Sussex men wicketkeepers. I mean, it's great, isn't it? I think it's, as women sports fans, you 2 must be encouraged to hear about those kind of developments.
Definitely. I mean, what you were saying about these games and women and men being paid the same for that one game, it's still unthinkable for most sports. So it's fantastic. I wonder, I mean, cricket is also a big sport in countries like India and Pakistan, South Africa, and all of these countries also have national women's team that qualify for the World Cup, and they have players like Shafali Verma, India, who's only 17 years old and who, you know, it's only at the beginning of her career and already ranks really well in world rankings. So how does the trajectory of these women teams in other countries might resemble the path that their fellow players in the UK had to go through?
Well, as with everything else, it's about money and audiences, isn't it? I mean, the kind of epicenter of world cricket is probably India these days. I mean, it's where the Indian Premier League is obviously happening. So obviously what they have in India is huge audiences, huge TV audiences. I mean, as well as, you know, huge stadia that are able to accommodate, you know, 70, 80,000 people. They also have millions and millions of people watching on the TV. It's a powerful nation in terms of its administrative power within the game. the most powerful or the best cricketing nation in terms of women's cricket by a long way is Australia, probably because of the kind of money that's been invested into the women's game. The fact that they don't have so many teams to start with, they just have less teams. So you're spreading the money across fewer. But really the professionalism that's happening in Australia, we are still a long way behind. But I think what's really good and what's makes me proud to be associated with the game is that we are making these changes. We are taking these steps. We are trying to redress the balance. We're trying to get rid of that century of inequality.
We're so happy you could join us today in Woman in Sport. I, Tess Mostelis, and my co-host Sophie Timmerman hope to continue to bring you exciting new topics.
If you want to join us on this journey, make sure to follow us. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music.
And if you like the show and want to support us, you can become our Patreon on patreon.com/womaninsportpodcast. See you next time.